more people in the waiting room. So I'm going to just start right now and say good morning to everybody. And thank you very much for participating in this webinar that Carrie Ann and I are putting together. I do appreciate Carrie Ann agreeing to do this. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sal Alessia. I am a wealth manager over at Morgan Stanley. I've been there for the past 5 years, but in a prior lifetime, I was actually an attorney, a practicing attorney. So the joke I like to say is I'm a recovering attorney. It's been close to 13 years since I've practiced law, and I have no intention of going back. I made the transition into financial services a little over 13 years ago. And primarily, we focus on working with and helping business owners, high net worth individuals that are nearing retirement, and those people who are either currently or contemplating getting divorced. Many of my clients have shared with me that they're having significant concerns. Obviously, during this current pandemic, we're all in a lockdown situation, and they're concerned about how are they going to make it to the other end of this tunnel. Hopefully we all will unscathed to a certain degree. I know that in trying times like this, many people are dealing with many different issues. They're afraid, many of my clients have said to me, they're afraid they're not going to be able to retire on the timeline that we had originally set out for them. And that's understandable, especially since the economics and their income has changed dramatically. And then additionally, more so, I'm hearing from many of my clients that's frustrated by the circumstances. You know, their businesses were doing very, very well, and the pandemic came out of nowhere and ultimately put them on the sidelines. So recognizing that we're all dealing with these kinds of situations, and I think people are looking for ways to be productive, positive, I thought it would be appropriate to have this type of a webinar. Carrie Ann is very apt to help us sort of deal with the situation and hopefully give us some, at least two unique ways to help with performance during these times. For a little housekeeping, we're going to be hosting the webinar for 1 hour. I'm going to ask anyone that if you do have questions, we currently have everyone muted, but if you do have questions, please raise them in the chat. The reason behind that is that we're able to save the chat. So for some reason, we're not able to answer your question during the live presentation. Myself and Carrie Ann will follow up with you directly if that's something that you'd be interested in. In addition to that, we're going to be sending out a follow-up email subsequent to the webinar itself. Right now, obviously, it's live, but we're going to be able to have a recording of this. I am recording it currently, and at some point, we're going to have the recording be able to share. I think Carrie Ann's going to be able to host that on her website. And ultimately, we want to have a survey that we'll send out. So in that email, you'll have a couple of different things. One would be a survey to give us a little bit of feedback if this is something you thought was helpful. Hopefully it is. In addition, you'll have my contact information and Carrie Ann's contact information, and ways to reach out to us individually if you so desire. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Carrie Ann Fournier. Carrie Ann is the CEO and founder of Vibrant Ventures. It's a professional services company dedicated to unlocking the highest level of performance for innovative companies, teams, and professionals by igniting their vibrancy and innovation. Carrie Ann has 25 plus years of experience in Wall Street strategy consulting and startup tech firms, and is certified in coaching through IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. Carrie Ann, I give it to you.
Well, I feel really good about myself after hearing that intro. Thank you very much, Sal. So first and foremost, everyone, thank you for your time. I know we've all got a million things we're juggling, from work to our families. And so I appreciate that you're giving me an hour of your time. And so Sal, if you want to go to the overview slide.
Sure.
Okay, so what is this time meant to do? And so it's meant to plant the seed for a few different tools and techniques for you to really reframe your thinking, getting you back to feeling like your best self, and also getting you laser focused on where you need to focus your time and attention, where you need to help if you're a leader of an organization or even a team, or maybe even just your family, how you get the ROI on your effort and really do so in a way that is fantastic leadership, really high impact leadership. So the two types of ways we'll cover, the first piece is really about performance mindset and motivation, the who you're being and the why you're acting. The second piece, we'll get into some operational effectiveness and leadership techniques, particularly effective during these crazy times. So just a footnote, I'm going to be giving you quite a bit of information. It is meant to be just an overview. Each one of these topics in and of itself could probably be at least an hour webinar, if not a much longer workshop series. It's meant to plant the seed. I can only go so deep, but I've been offering everyone, it'll be part of the information we'll provide. I'm offering complimentary coaching and consulting sessions through the end of May. I'm here to be of service. If you have any questions about how this might apply to you or your organization, please do not hesitate to reach out. And with that, Sal, why don't we go to our first poll?
Okay. Let me see if I can do that. Okay.
So this is a question. So do you feel you have the right mindset now to lead and operate at your best?
All right, we're getting a lot of responses.
Okay, great.
Still waiting for a few more.
See if any more are coming in. And you know what, not surprisingly, you know, I've found even for myself over the last few weeks, this has been really quite a cycle. So, okay, so why don't we go to the next? Thank you everyone for that feedback. It really kind of spans from a few minimally, a few to the top, really in the zone, and a bunch of folks really in the middle. Excellent. So the first topic we're going to talk about is really what I call choosing the ways of being. You know, so much of stuff is happening around us that is out of our control. And as most people are really focused on from a place of self-satisfaction and whether they're doing a good job, or motivation is what they're accomplishing. All the types of things that are more externally focused, and really when things are in such turmoil can feel very disempowering. The one thing that we all profoundly have at our disposal to help us step into our power, really be our most empowered self, is being clear on the who we want to be when we want to do the what. And so what I mean by that is, rather than I want to be able to provide financial services to my clients right now, that's what I do. Let's say if somebody decided who I want to be a person of deep integrity. I want to be someone of deep contribution, who I'm sure is, Sal may not have chosen this, but I feel like that is how he's living into right now, of being someone who's really contributing. Let's say you're someone who really wants to be creative in this time. There's the who we are while we're handling the what that's coming at us that really helps us be our most authentic self. And I'll give a little bit of a silly example. It's less of a personal example, but it's not a professional example, it's a personal example. I know someone whose their core way of being is being an adventure spirit. They are an adventurous person. They're always out and about and doing, and now they are homebound, sheltered in place with 3 kids, 2 dogs, I think a cat, and a husband. And they felt like they were completely out of alignment with who they were, their adventure spirit. They couldn't be productive in their work and who they were, because they just felt disconnected to who they were. And so when they realized they could reframe even how they're interacting with their children from a place of adventure, the types of activities they did, even how they handled their meal prep, how they handled communication, sort of a sense of fun and curiosity, they were able to shift the energy in their house, in themselves. And once again, even though it was a personal choice, they found that they were able to step into their most productive, high performance self, just doing that one little shift. And so what I would ask, and if people want to put in in the chat, give me 1 or 2 things of the who you'd want to be even during these times of crisis. And I would say many of us have a few of these that we live throughout our life, but it's often perfectly acceptable to say, you know what, in this period of time, this is the who I want to show up to be. And I'll give you a personal example. For me, I want to be self-expressed and I want to be high contribution. It's one of the major reasons why I decided to do this webinar, because I know for me to be my most high performing self, I need to be self-expressed. I need to be putting new content out, and I need to be doing it for a reason, to be able to help others. And so for me, as soon as I re-locked into those two ways of being of who I am at my best self, I was able to sort of shift out of the very understandable and normal reaction in this crazy times into a place of really being in my authentic self. So Sal, what are we seeing as any particular themes as far as ways of being? Anything come up?
Yeah, so Glenn Rudin said he wants to be a leader or a mentor. Brian Yotis, hey doc, would like to be a leader, creative, and visionary. Larry Trapani says wisdom. Jeff Hawk is a market expert, and Taub, hey cuz, strength and humor. Jeff Hawk, socially connected through giving back. Mitch York, a source of calm for clients.
Love it.
Kathleen Reynolds, calm and leadership. And Nina Hawk, creativity. So
Absolutely. And so what I would
Scott
ask,
Lewis, a
it's so
source of
great that you
calm.
guys are articulating this, as things are coming at you that just feel frustrating, or even good, by the way. It's easier to apply it to the bad things, but you can even double down on good things and make them extraordinary by putting this wrapper on it. But we'll focus on the things that are tougher today. Figure out, reconnect to these ways of being that you want to do. And once again, it can be personal or professional. Say, how would this look in this situation? What is, let's, for example, if somebody wrote courageous, what does courageous look like in this environment? And by the way, it's personal to you. As long as it resonates with you, it's something that once again shifts your energy. There is no right or wrong. It's a place of putting yourself in your most empowered, productive self. I would say when I do this exercise with my clients, I typically ask to do, to pick 5. It's very tempting to do more. And I always say, put those others in a waiting list. See if you can come up with anywhere from 3 to 5 and really have those anchors, write them down, put them on your screensaver on your phone. I've done that because God knows I look at my phone too much. Put it as a post-it on your computer or on your refrigerator, because I'm certainly going there more often as well. And they're just reminders, because listen, we're all going to fall off of this. We're all going to feel out of pocket, out of sorts. And that's very, very normal. The quick thing is realizing that something doesn't feel right. Something feels off. We're sort of sinking into almost like a victim mentality, or how am I going to do it? Realizing that your power comes from whatever you've articulated, and then saying, coming from a question of, what does this look? What does courage look like? What does authenticity look like? What is whatever it is in whatever issue you're trying to address. So that is a choosing ways of being exercise. I find it as an anchor to really get my power back and really step into my most authentic self. And I know it's always been the first exercise I've done with any of my coaching clients, because it provides the true north to the life and the who you want to be. So with that, unless there's any questions, are there any questions on that before we move to the next slide? The next concept's a little bit more complicated.
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay, great. So we're going to go, if that was sort of a basic concept, this one is more complicated, but really important. And there are many ways at getting at sort of your deepest level motivation, this why. I am leveraging Simon Sinek's methodology because I really find it gets at a level of motivation and inspiration, and it's even based on science. I'll kind of hopefully I won't bore you. I'm going to go into a little bit of a science of why this is so important. So most people, when they think about who they are, they talk about what they do, both personally and professionally. I'm an IT analyst. I'm a consultant that does compensation programs. It's all about the what. And as we're all trying to figure out, and perhaps even in our businesses pivot to what do we do in this new paradigm? How do we just, everything that we were doing before, do we just try and do that online? Well, that in some instances just sounds ridiculous. And maybe it's It's incrementally effective, but it's not going to really accelerate your performance or really help you maybe even innovate in times of such crisis. And when you anchor to your why, when you anchor to your deepest purpose and what you believe, both as an individual, and I could have a very long workshop on what this means for companies. It helps you anchor into what you're trying to provide and contribute and the impact you're trying to make, so that from that point, you can say, how is that true in this new environment? What are the new ways that we can deliver on that promise, right? Because it's a promise and it's about who you are regardless of the environment going on. And that's the same thing both individually and from a corporate perspective. It just gets a little bit more complicated from a company perspective. And so, so I'll go through quickly. There's, and Simon Sinek calls this the golden circle. And so at the outside is what most people are used to thinking about. It's the what, right? It's the what you do, how often you do it. And what's interesting, once again, not to dork out on some science concepts, but this golden circle actually emulates how your brain is structured. So the outside of your brain is actually called the neocortex, and it's the part of your brain that processes facts and figures and language, right? So it's the very tactical, clear aspect of how your brain processes. When you go inward, when you go to the fuzzier stuff that's really important, it's called the limbic brain. And that's where feelings and actually decisions are made. It's your deep intuition, your gut, that sometimes you can't really articulate. You don't know why, but something's really compelling you forward. And what's interesting, in this part of the limbic brain, there is no capacity for language. Even though it's your deepest level driver and motivation, unless you have a specific technique to really access it, it's very difficult at times to express the why of your why. And the why of your why is so important, once again, because it is what's going to keep you fulfilled. It is what is going to keep you motivated. And certainly it is what is going to inspire others. Quick note when I use the word fulfilled. Fulfilled is not the same thing as happiness, okay? Happiness is situational. Fulfilled is something that you know that you're driving to your passion and purpose. So how I like to just, an analogy is the difference between happiness and fulfillment is like liking and loving your children. You may not always like your children, but you always love them. I used that example with my dad recently, since we are cohabitating during this crisis, and we thought that was pretty funny. I think I struck a nerve. Anyway, so going back to why this is so important, to be able to say what your why is the ability to say how you want to show up in this new environment. And I'll give you a couple of examples that here, I wrote them on the side here, so because I knew I wouldn't be able to just clearly remember them from heart, is, for example, Airbnb. It's a company that we all know. What do? They give you rooms. There's rooms that allow you to stay, hopefully at a cheaper price. That's what they do. Their why is to connect millions of people in real life all over the world so that they can belong anywhere. Because traveling could and should be much more intimate than staying in a hotel, right? So that's their why. That's their compelling reason to kind of go to market and what they're and the essence of how they want to be. And so the rooms and all these other services that they have are just delivering on their promise. Here's another one that I thought was interesting, because it's a company that nobody knows. And yet if they had just described the what, I think I would go to sleep. But when they describe their why, I'm like, wow, tell me more. So this is, it's called PK Clean, to end landfilling and create a clean and secure new energy source for a more sustainable world. Because the future can't just be a giant landfill. Guess what they do? They convert plastic into reusable oil. If somebody came to me and said, oh, you know, that's what I do for a living, I'm like, oh, great. Somebody tells me their why, and I'm like, awesome, cool, tell me more. So now in this environment, let's say they were struggling with something going on due to the pandemic. The question is now, in that promise, in that why, in that purpose, what are new and different nimble ways that they can deliver on that? So I'll give you a personal example, and I'm always refining mine. But my personal why is to unlock people's highest potential, to be their most fulfilled and vibrant self, so that they can unleash a tsunami of positive impact on the world. That's what gets me up every single day. It always has. And so for me, my question in this new environment is, okay, how do I continue to deliver on that promise? Maybe it's some of the same things that I were doing before. Maybe it's different. Maybe the how changes. Maybe there's new product opportunities. But I know that if I'm living into that, I'm still, even with all the challenges, even with all the frustrations, and to be frank, even normal personal fear due to the health crisis, that I'm still going to be focused on my most fulfilled and aligned self. So there's a way at getting at that. We'll kind of quickly go through a 3-step process. Once again, this is absolutely a workshop in and of itself, but just so people can start thinking about it, the more you start to noodle on it, you know, these things come to us in all sorts of interesting and unique ways once the seed is planted. So the first start is, you know, this isn't what you aspire to be. This isn't a mission statement on the who your company or who you aspire to be. This is your core, and let's talk about personal for this example. This is who you've always been in your best self. And so think about, the first part is collect stories. Collect stories about your past that really were really important to you. I mean, significant. Both the peaks and the valleys, right? The things where everything felt like you were just at your best, things were in the zone, as well as the things when you felt like you hit rock bottom, you were totally out of sorts. And do it in as much detail as possible. Feelings, situational details, everything. I mean, just do a brain dump. Don't edit yourself, put it down. Record yourself, type, write, whatever it is that a way to kind of just brainstorm and stream of consciousness and get it out of yourself. So that's step one. And by the way, I highly recommend doing it with a partner. And believe it or not, someone who doesn't know you as well, so they won't fill in the blanks of your stories or lead you during this. If there's someone you kind of know, certainly not pitching right now, a coach, perfect for this, but really anybody who knows you enough. But then do this and then take a step back and look at it and look at themes. Look at the ways of being, the things that have really, you just always stepped into or away from something. Where was the themes about how you wanted to leave an impact? And you'll see these nuggets will start to come out. And so once you start to just kind of see themes, the next is then just start to draft. This is a please embrace, particularly in this environment, perfectly imperfect. This is not about creating perfect marketing materials. This isn't about having the absolute cleanest, it's only 10 words phrase. This is so that you can start to get a sense of your why. If you ever wanted to take it to, once you've identified it, into marketing materials and nice crisp statements, that's a whole different exercise. This is to ground you in what drives you. So put it in this format that I have on the bottom here. To articulate your why, use the structure of, 2, what is this contribution that you find yourself striving to, or always being in, so that, and what's the impact that you've found you've historically looked to make in your life? And once again, it's got corporate impact. If somebody's leading an organization and you'd like to do this exercise for that, that's great too. Something I would say though is what's kind of curious as you're trying to, as you examine your stories and as you're looking for your why, ironically, it's not why questions that will help you get there. Because once again, you're going to the portion of your brain that doesn't have language facility. What you want to use is what. So instead of why was that so impactful to me, it's kind of very general, it really won't help you get at it. Ask yourself, what about it made that so impactful? What about it? That will bring you back to your neocortex, and that will help you find the facts and figures and details that are necessary in order to really hone in and get at what your why is about. So as I said, like this, I could go on and on about this. I absolutely love this as an exercise. This is meant to get you in a process of discovery. This isn't meant to be the perfect why statement that you would publish at this point. Listen, if you're there, great, but please, I can't encourage you enough. Embrace the perfectly imperfect. Be just in the process of discovery, and being in action in discovery in and of itself will help you get into a performance mindset. Do we have any questions in the chat on this, Sal?
No, nothing right now. Looks like
Okay,
everybody's
great.
listening intently.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, so thank you for your patience. Now we're going to go into sort of more tangible skills, really operational effectiveness, that I think are really critical in this paradigm. So I think we're going to go to 2 polls quick.
Okay.
So the first poll is, do you feel you and your team are effectively focusing on the right activities in this fluid environment? So that's the first poll. Wow, people are doing good. That's great. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'll go through this next structure that we'll talk about, but hopefully it'll just be reiterating things that you're doing. Or like I said, sometimes people look at interventions, only things were going poorly. Sometimes layering on different frameworks, even when they're going well, really accelerate even greater high performance. Excellent. Sounds like people are in a pretty good place. Okay, great. All right, so now there's a second question that we'd like to see. So do you feel you need to adjust, for those of you who are leaders, do you feel you need to adjust your leadership style during this time? Okay, somewhat. Great. Well, what we'll talk about will be perfect. It's okay, great. So why don't we go to that first 4 box? Excellent. Okay, guys, so this is a 4 box prioritization grid that many of us, hopefully, you've experienced in the past. This is not new news in many regards. It's really meant to be a reminder. So when you look at this prioritization matrix, you'll see that there are 2 different axes. On the bottom, it's how difficult is something? Is it easy? Is it hard? And listen, it could be easy and hard in a number of different dimensions: technological, operational, communication. There's different ways that you might look at whether it's easy or hard, but overall, figure out where you think something is. On the other axis is how important is it? Is it minimally important, or is it really important? And the reason why laying this grid over activities is 2 things. Right now, we have so much new stuff coming at us. You know, it's not even a daily basis. It can be almost, it feels like a minute to minute, hour to hour basis. That it's important to sometimes step back and not just be reactive to the last thing on the pile, or the thing that's on the bottom, like the thing that's on the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile, because those are the things that are just drawing our attention. Really, what is the activity, the outcomes that you are really committed to that's important for your company? And for it, you know, once again, this could also be personally, what are the outcomes that are really, really important? And then once you identify the outcomes that are really, really important, what are the underlying tasks there in order to make it really, really accelerated productivity and performance? When we're all stressed, it is very normal and natural for every single thing to have just as much weightiness. Things that can be very easy in this environment can feel really, really hard. And that energy weighs us all down. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that just feel like they're like living under like a wet blanket at the moment energetically. Partly because they haven't really done this exercise to figure out what's important and how really hard is something. And so what you'll see is oftentimes, I've seen this way too many times in teams, organizations, there are things that are of relatively low importance that are actually pretty difficult. And it could be difficult from a technology perspective or even a change management perspective, all sorts of ways. And they spend way too much time in this bucket. That is absolute wasted energy. And as we're all trying to get into high performance, that is absolutely not where you should go. Likewise, there are things that are pretty easy, but they're relatively low impact. And these are the distractions. These are the things that, yeah, you can get to do it, and maybe because they're easy and you don't want to deal with the harder, high impact things, your energy can draw you there, your focus can get drawn there, but they're not really going to be creating a lot of impact, and certainly not going to help you accelerate performance in this environment. When you go up the chart, hopefully there are things that are relatively easy to do that are actually really high impact. You know, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to recently that they're like, I don't know how to business develop in this environment. Like, what in the world does that look like? I'm going to have to take a much longer frame, like a longer term view on this, because I'm just kind of frozen. You know, it's really easy to just check in on people with absolutely no intention on selling or business developing. That's a quick win. That's deepening the relationship. That's just creating a human connection. But you know, that human connection, that relationship is really high important if you're looking to run a business. That's a quick win. That's an easy win. The other things that legitimately have a lot of weight but are difficult, this is where you need to kind of take it out, look at it under a microscope, and kind of de-average. Say, okay, what about this? You can almost actually take that whole bucket and then layer on a 4-box grid again and say, of the tasks in that upper right-hand quadrant, what about it is actually what's low impact, high impact, and easy and hard? Because even though the overall thing may seem difficult, all its subcomponent parts usually are not. And the way to get momentum on some of these things that are really important or difficult is to sort of then tackle those things that are manageable and accomplishable very easy on. Any questions on this?
Nope, seems pretty quiet.
Okay, great. Once again, hopefully it's something that people have had in their toolkit, but it's just remembering that it's there and it's something that you can use. Things are changing so quickly. I know I look at this, if not daily, at least a couple of times a week for my own work, and what's shifting and where I need to put my company's time and energy and my personal time and energy. So keep it fluid. So now going on, so how do you manage? How do you manage in the most effective manner, particularly in this crazy unprecedented time? So if you want to go to the next slide. There we go. This is a concept that I love, and I have done in every team that I've taken over. When I was in corporate, I tended to, parachute myself into, or be parachuted into, turnaround situations. And oftentimes, I joke, I would inherit sort of the land of the misfit toys, folks that I wasn't really sure how I was going to bring them up to the level of performance that was required by the organization and by the leader. And what you do is you don't just look at the individual, right? It's very easy to say, you know what, I'll use Sal as an example again. Sal is an expert, highly, highly competent in financial advisory and as being a lawyer. But, and this kind of played out. We both, well, you were more an expert than I was, but we said, okay, we need to host a webinar, a Zoom webinar. That's a new skill. That's something new, right? And so if I was managing Sal, and in the past, I just left him alone. He was in his expertise. He would check back and meet with me every once in a while. I would have to kind of come in and perhaps be more directive and say, hey, this is kind of what I need. I didn't do this because we were partnering, but if I was managing someone more junior than myself, I said, listen, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. That's what I need. And so let's go through the quadrant because I think that helps. Everything on leadership is a combination of how directive are you, how authoritative are you, and then how much do you coach them, how much do you support them, how much do you help them build their confidence in what they're doing. And so let's take the S1 quadrant, that red quadrant. Let's say somebody comes in as an analyst in an organization. They've never been an analyst before. This is their first time in their job. You know what, saying, hey, great job, being sort of a coach, they don't really need it at this point. What will make them most successful is being able to listen, Jane, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. These are the processes you're on. These are the files I need you to manage. These are the deadlines I need you to hit. And here's how I need you to do it. You will have a much greater likelihood of success by being extremely explicit and directed. This is actually when micromanaging is effective. The problem with micromanagers is they never let go and they stay that way for eternity and forever, right? And you'll also see the managers that never realize that some employees need specific direction, and they kind of flail and flounder, and people can't understand why it took so long for the employee to actually get up to speed, or unfortunately they fail before they even had a chance to begin. So hopefully when a manager is really explicit, they get their bearings. It's like you give the employee a compass that they know when and where they're supposed to be doing stuff. And hopefully this accelerates them into that second quadrant. They're still relatively new to the job, or actually new to the situation, the task. But they're getting their feeling. They're feeling it out. They're starting to realize, okay, wait a second, I can do this. As a manager, you still need to be highly directive. You still need to be involved in a lot of decision making and guidance, but this is where you're trying to build their confidence and also give them both positive as well as constructive feedback. And I do mean constructive feedback. I don't mean criticism, right? Two halves of the same coin, perhaps, but the energy is really to bring somebody forward versus something that's you're right, they're wrong, right? So if you're championing the spirit of who they are and that they're going to be a top producer for you, then constructive feedback versus criticism is the mechanism. So you're still very involved as a manager in that task, telling them what to do, and you're helping coaching them, hopefully over time. And this arc is different for every employee and depending on the task. Hopefully they get to the point where, you know what, they can operate on their own quite a bit. They check in with you. They may ask you for advice. But it is not going to be the constant or the more continual directive. You're really going to let back on that more authoritative management and let them step into their capabilities. And you're coaching them. You're saying, wow, this is how I think you should do it. These are some suggestions. Come back to me with any questions. But you're really starting to relinquish the directive and go into a coaching mode. Last but not least, when somebody is really, really an expert, you do not need to be directive or supportive. Like, for example, I had a head of HRIS, human resource information systems, and I used to joke, I use him as an example when I did this. If I went to Jerry and said, wow, great job updating that, table today, I look like an idiot. Like, he doesn't need feedback or coaching and great job for the tasks. He's highly capable. Now, that's not to say that giving him feedback that I really thought he was a wonderful employee, or maybe constructive feedback, let's work on some communication skills. That's still, necessary as cultivating the employee and their potential. But on a task level and a situation level, when you get someone there, you just let them go. They still, obviously, as a manager, you need to update you on what's going on so you understand. But yeah, this is where if you're really actively managing these people, you're wasting a lot of time and energy. Now, the reason why this framework is so important right now is at least the people that I'm talking to, there are a lot of moving parts. Organizations are being asked to do different things. Employees are being asked to do things that were not traditionally in their job description. And so, how do you manage them when you're asking them to really do things that haven't been in their wheelhouse before? And so, another note, when I have trained on this, I have traditionally, it's always been just the leaders or managers who have gotten this training. I think it's really important to show this grid to your employees. They have to realize that asking for more direction is not failing, because many times they're motivated by goodwill and they want to say, I just want to take it on. I just want to go do it. But you know what? They're going to be flailing and floundering. That's not going to accelerate their performance, and it's probably going to lead to a lot of frustration. And we don't have the time right now to necessarily allow for that that searching as they're figuring it out. So if they're really taking on something, a task, a situation that we haven't had any experience in before, they should know and need to know that it's absolutely okay and expected for them to get direction. Because if they're not used to it, they may feel that you're micromanaging them. And that doesn't feel good. But to say, no, in this situation, this is new. I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how I need you to do it. Hopefully your competent employees really accelerate into that coaching and then quickly into the supporting environment. But yeah, this in highly changing environments where people are being asked to step up and step out of their comfort zone, this is probably one of the most important leadership techniques that I can recommend. And it requires you some different skills as a leader. It really requires you to understand your employee, understand where their capabilities and skills are, understand where their confidence lies and where it is and what you could do to help bolster and then sort of launch them into their most productive self. And so, yes, you're going to have to, especially in the beginning when this isn't as natural, be a little forcefully analytical about it and really think about, what am I asking them to do? What is the tone and texture of the task? And then who are they? What are their confidence and capabilities? And what's the match? And this is the leadership style that I need to deploy in order to accelerate performance. So,
We have a comment
question?
from Howard. He mentions that he's currently closed. Tomorrow he could be open or he might not be, but it's tough to manage if you don't know what tomorrow brings. Can you kind of comment on that a little bit?
You know, it's a great question. So I'm assuming there is something to be done now. So what I would go to rather than this tactical is go back to the why. So the what of what you were doing may no longer resonate, or you haven't figured out necessarily how to deliver it, but based upon if you know what your company or your personal why is, you know, what is that promise? What is that contribution? What is the impact are you looking to make? That is a great place to then start to nimbly pivot and say, what else can we do to deliver on that? And it may be very nonlinear and it may seem a little crazy, but if it's anchored to your why, it at least is a place to play to say, okay, how can we make this possible? What would it take? And then that's when you go into that 4-quadrant grid of like focusing on the work, focusing on what would we need to do in order to deliver on that new idea. And you kind of toggle between those two different models in order to get innovation and then execution on perhaps a new idea. Lastly, to his point, it's so hard to deal with times that are out of our control, right? Where we just don't know. That is also why going back to that first exercise of the who you're going to be, who are you? So in this time of uncertainty, I don't know if you had articulated something, but let's say balance was a quality that you want to be in this environment in such uncertainty. Well, I would ask, what does balance look like for you? If it was creativity, if it was authenticity, if it was contribution, what do those qualities look like for you when things are so uncertain? So at least in the current moments, you can feel anchored to what you can do in the situation you're placed in. Hopefully that helps. Webinars are so interesting because I can't see facial reactions and
Right.
you know, judge, but hopefully that was helpful. And certainly please email me if you want to have any other further conversation on that, Howard.
He said thank you. So I guess it helped.
So that's the general tour. Like I said, it's a lot to go over in, you know, this amount of time, but I really wanted to plant the seed of these different types of tools and techniques that help you step back into your power, help you feel fulfilled even in really challenging times. We are all going to fall off the horse. The question is, do we have the mindset and the tools to get back on as quickly as possible? As I mentioned earlier in today's webinar, I'm a place of self-expression and contribution. That is who I am, and certainly what am I looking to embody right now. To that end, I'm offering a complimentary coaching and consulting sessions through the end of May. If you have any questions on how any of these models or all of these models could apply professionally or personally, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm really here to help. And if there's any other questions that you have on how to shift your mindset or challenges that you're having, please just shoot me a note, and happy to be able to be of service.
Carrie Ann, with that last offer that you made, I know there's a lot of professional advisors on the call as well. Would you be open to the idea of maybe talking to their clients?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
I'm happy to do more webinars. I'm happy to do workshops. I'm happy to For me, how I'm handling this crazy time is being in a place of service. And the rest will fall out as it is. Like, that is beyond my control. What is in my control is, like we talked about, what I can contribute and who I'm being in this time. So I will be of service to individuals, to clients, to parents. I've actually talked to a few spouses of clients recently, just because, makes everyone a lot happier at home. So.
All right, this is great. Thank you very much for that offer. I'll leave it open right now for questions. If anybody has any specific questions and you want to put them in the chat. If not, on the screen right now, you'll see ways that you can contact Carrie Ann directly. We'll also be sending out an email so that you have information that you can contact her as well. We have one question here from Natasha Roman. Hello, Natasha. In order to change your mindset during this time, I understand thinking about what would make me successful. How do we implement this? Is it by setting reminders?
So I'd say two things. So if I were coaching you, I'd say, let's get onto the texture of what does successful look like for you, right? Because successful is a word, but it doesn't have a lot of characteristics that would help define how you would feel successful at the end. And not to be repetitive, I'd go back to some of those mindset exercises in the very beginning and kind of explore what that looks like. And then say, okay, let's get really specific on what success looks like. And then let's execute the hell out of it, looking at, that where you need to focus on, what you need to focus on, when does it need to get done by, once again, how hard, how difficult, who else do you need to enroll? I think there's power in partnerships these days and helping people. There's so many people who want to help. I just want to remind everyone, you don't have to put it all on your shoulders. There is an army of folks who also realize that getting out of this crazy place is in being of contribution. And so that's what I would talk to you about. That's what we would work on.
Awesome. Thank you again, Carrie Ann. I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who attended. Like I said, we'll be sending out some additional information for everyone. And if you have any further thoughts or you need some additional help, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you everyone for your time and attention. It's really appreciated, and have a great shelter in place weekend.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. Take care.
Thanks, guys.